All right, today is Wednesday, usually a big practice day for the 49ers, but because they have a Monday night game, it was a day off for the team. But the 49ers did have some kickers in, and they have a new kicker that they're putting on the practice squad. Matt Gay, veteran, who was released by the Washington Commanders earlier in the week. In fact, he was released to make room for, you guessed it, Jake Moody, as the Commanders signed Moody off the practice squad of the Chicago Bears. Matt Gay was unemployed for only a couple days, though, as the 49ers brought him in along with four other kickers. Matt Gay wins the competition to be the 49ers' next kicker. And so basically, the reason the 49ers made a spot for him on the practice squad by releasing Russell Gage Jr., the wide receiver who opened the season as an active player on the 49ers for the first game of the season. Um, they didn't want to clear a roster spot for a kicker that they hope they'll only have to use for a couple of games. So Eddie Pinheiro with the hamstring injury is not going on injured reserve. The 49ers will just bump up Matt Gay for as many games as they need him. And so he will be the kicker Monday night. And so to tell you a little bit about Matt Gay, he's 31 years old. He's been kicking around the NFL for a little bit now. Opened his career with Tampa Bay. You probably remember him 3 seasons with the LA Rams. Then he went to Indianapolis for 2 years, signed a big contract, as I recall, to go to Indianapolis. And then this year with Washington was only 13 of 19 on field goal attempts, including, he missed 5 from 50 plus. He was only 4 of 9 from 50 plus, 22 of 22 on extra points. So Eddie Pinheiro, I think he's 22 of 22 on field goals, but he's missed 4 extra points. So it's kind of flipped with Matt Gay. So Matt Gay comes in. He kicked for the Washington Commanders for 10 games. In his career, 84% field goal percentage. And we'll see. It's a temporary thing for the 49ers to bring him in. The other kickers that they brought in for tryouts, Tanner Brown, Anders Carlson, John Parker Romo, and Cade York. So the 49ers decide to go with Matt Gay as the kicker. And as I mentioned, they cleared a roster spot by waiving Russell Gage Jr. Earlier in the day, the 49ers signed Stone Blanton, the linebacker who they had in during the offseason program. They had him in training camp from Ole Miss. He's kind of bounced around. This is at least his second time on the 49ers practice squad. He was released a couple weeks ago. And so I think probably what you're going to see here, at least in the coming days, would be, I would assume, it would be Monday. So now, because the 49ers have a Monday game, their final roster moves or the elevations from the practice squad, those can be accomplished or those can be submitted by 1 p.m. on Monday for those players to be eligible to play in the game. And so I would think that the 49ers would elevate Jalen Graham from the practice squad to be able to play, as well as Matt Gay. So Matt Gay takes over Eddie Pinheiro with the hamstring injury. And so those are the 49ers roster moves. I hadn't really thought of Russell Gage too much. I know I wrote about him and talked a lot about him during the offseason program and also training camp, specifically in training camp. I thought he had a really good training camp. And, there was a point where I thought he had a good chance to make the 49ers 53-man roster. Ultimately, of course, the 49ers decided not to go with him. This is a guy that, was active for that first game of the season against Seattle. He didn't play a whole lot, didn't catch any passes in that game. Let's see. In that game, he appeared in 28 plays, 28 offensive plays for the 49ers, but that was the one and only time that he was elevated from the practice squad to play in this game. So I think the 49ers feel better about where they are with the wide receiver position now. Where they are, they have a wide receiver inactive for every game. Um, Everyone's healthy who's on the 53-man roster. So this last game at wide receiver, the 49ers went with Ricky Pearsall, Jawan Jennings, Kendrick Bourne, Sky Moore as the return specialist, and then the fifth receiver was Demarcus Robinson. 49ers deactivated for the game the rookie Jordan Watkins. So they have enough players at wide receiver now, I think, to like get through practices and everything else. So that's why they felt like Russell Gage was expendable at this point, that they didn't need him on the practice squad. Then, of course, there's still looming out there the possibility of Brandon Aiyuk, who remains on PUP. Um, you know, I do this thing at NBC Sports Bay Area called 49ers Overreactions, and one of the reactions that I responded to this week was just, Brandon Aiyuk. And the comment was the 49ers don't need Brandon Aiyuk with the way they played offensively um, against the Arizona Cardinals. They don't need him, and he'll never play for the 49ers again. And I labeled that as not an overreaction, just because I don't think it's a given that Brandon Aiyuk plays for the 49ers. Um, do I think that there's a chance that he will? Of course, but I also think there's a chance that he doesn't. I just can't. It's kind of difficult to get a read on where he is physically. Haven't seen him in quite some time, and this was a guy that during training camp and the early weeks of the regular season, he was always out there at the start of practice running routes and being very observant, very much it appeared to be engaged with the wide receivers, what they were doing. He was always around the huddle, running routes on air. And so it just kind of seemed to me like he was yearning to get out there. So I don't know what he's been doing as far as rehab behind the scenes. I know John Lynch on his weekly show on KNBR, he's asked about him, it seems like every week. And John Lynch seems to indicate, I think John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan have been a bit vague on Brandon Aiyuk's status, but John Lynch has seemed to indicate that Brandon Aiyuk is doing all the things behind the scenes. One thing that they continually repeat is that it was a very serious injury that he sustained. That was week 7 of the 24 season. He had his surgery on November 15th. What was that, about 3 weeks later, almost a month later, after the swelling finally went down in that right knee. So he had the torn anterior cruciate ligament, he had the torn medial collateral ligament, and also had cartilage damage. But I remember reporting between the end of the offseason program and the beginning of training camp that he seemed to be making really good progress. And, it wasn't out of nobody had ruled out an early season return for him. But then, in recent weeks, beginning with that Friday before the 49ers departed to go to Houston, Kyle Shanahan said that he always kind of viewed week 10 as the week where, okay, it starts to get real. And at that point, he even said, hey, there's a chance that he could be elevated to practice, or they have that practice window open for him the next week. Well, obviously that didn't happen, and it hasn't happened any week since then. And now the season is starting to get away from the team a little bit, or getting away from Brandon Aiyuk. So we'll see where this goes. He has the big contract that he signed 16 months ago or whatever that's been, right before the start of the 24 season, got off to the slow start. And then of course the injury. So I don't, we'll see where it goes. I think anything is possible. Nothing would really surprise me at this point about where things are with him as it pertains to his status with the team. The other wide receiver is Jacob Cowing, who had a couple of severe hamstring injuries of his own during training camp, and the window could be open for him after the bye week, Shanahan said. But there again, right now, I don't think there's a spot on the 53-man roster for Jacob Cowing. Sky Moore is doing a good job handling the return duties. There's really not an opening for anybody to jump up over at this point Jennings, Pearsall, and Bourne. Demarcus Robinson hasn't exactly lit the world on fire, but he's still considered the 49ers fourth receiver ahead of Jordan Watkins, with Sky Moore being, the return specialist. So that's the quick rundown of the 49ers roster moves on this day, as Matt Gay is the kicker who's been selected by the 49ers recently of the Washington Commanders. Matt Gay will take over for Eddie Pinheiro for as long as the 49ers need a kicker in place of Eddie Pinheiro. Thanks for watching this video, and that is it for now.